can't really see him unless you're down here, so. It's kind of, it's right here. I think there's like 5 of them there. I have some handouts going around. Charles Klink was a druggist. He was from Germany, and he was an amateur botanist. He would send cones and seeds back to Germany to be germinated into trees. He was mixing drugs for Dr. Jason Boyce, who's also buried here, and later struck out on his own, starting C.F. Klink and Company with William Markfeld down at L and 3rd and later 2nd K. They analyzed substances in their lab. At the time, police departments didn't have, hi Mom, didn't have CSI. So often an unknown chemical would be sent to a druggist for analysis. An 1859 ad states, by analysis they are prepared to accurately estimate the quality and quantity of valuable metals contained in mineral substances and earthy combinations, or to tell the kind and quantity of poisons used in destroying life. In 1860 newspapers, Klink and Dr. Boyce got into a 19th century version of a flame war. Klink, remember, had worked for Boyce for a year, about Klink preparing his own version of a popular patent medicine called Rowler's Infallible Rheumatism Medicine. Boyce's card, they published little cards in the paper that talk trash about each other, said, base counterfeit, beware of fraud, rascality exposed. It refers to Klink and Company as unscrupulous drug swindlers, as opposed to the scrupulous kind. Which is rich if you consider the certain ineffectiveness of either of their remedies. Rascality, yeah. Klink dared him to take him to court, but it turned out that Boyce didn't have any money. But Klink said about, Dr. Boyce said about Klink here, he said, these druggists lack the qualifications to make a decent counterfeit of the genuine article. But hey, didn't he just work for you just a year ago? What's going on here? And he said the person's taking Klink's medicine would more likely reach the graveyard than be cured of rheumatism. So what was in it? Well, wintergreen, sarsaparilla, bark, simple syrup, orange water, potash, and extract of conium. Does anyone know what conium is? Hemlock. Poison hemlock, which actually has been used as a sedative and for antispasmodic properties by the Greeks and Persians, for arthritis too. But it's not very effective because the difference between therapeutic and toxic amounts is very slight. And then, you go into paralysis, loss of speech, your organs shut down, and you die, and then you don't care about your arthritis. They dissolved their business in 1867, and he went out on his own. And then in 1880, Klink retired and went back to Germany to check on the trees that had grown from the pellets that he had sent back there 20, 30 years ago. And that's the story of Klink there. All right, and then we don't have to move, actually, right over here, I think. On that one where those 2 ladies are sitting, you don't have to move. He's not going to jump out and grab you or anything. But George Vail, I don't know much about him, but I know he was a 53-year-old man, and he had a friend he ran into they hadn't seen for years named Toe-Headed Charlie. Charlie Foster. We all have a friend named Toe-Headed Charlie, who had rooms over the bank exchange, which I think was the second in Jay, somewhere around that Old Town area. The old friends met in Towhead and Charlie's rooms and asked after each other's health, and Foster said, "You're getting old, you don't sit down as nimbly as you did before." And he said, "Yeah." George said, "Yeah, my bones ache." So Foster said, "He had a sure cure for aches and rheumatism. He used it on himself." He picked up a little instrument and a vial and asked him where the pain was, pulled his pants down, gave him an injection in the fatty part of his thigh without telling him what it was. It was morphine. Vale rose from the chair and declared that he had no more pain. After a half an hour, they left Foster's rooms and were en route to their own hotel room when he felt dizzy, and they went out to get some air. Unfortunately, after that, they went to the oyster saloon, where they threw down a lot of oysters and knocked down the oysters with about 6 glasses of cider. And the cider on top of the morphine was too much for poor old George, and he died. Towhead Charlie was arrested, but he was not suspected of any malicious intent, so he was discharged. And unfortunately, he committed suicide less than 2 years later. So that's that story. Now we're going to go down this way, around by that car, and pass down this way towards the Grand Army of the Republic. Okay, can you hear me? Yes. All right. Yeah. Thank you. What a great turnout. This is really a huge crowd. Love it. Thank you for the support. The Old City Cemetery Committee. Thanks you very much for our support, and we're going to try and continue doing the best damn tours that this town has as long as we can. This guy here is Charles Wetzel. He was a cop murdered by an opium fiend. Wetzel's father, Martin, had a grocery store at 4th and N. Charles Wetzel was arrested several times for battery in his youth, and he later became a cop. But in 1890, his wife Jessie committed suicide by taking a dose of carbolic acid in the Clooney building. Sounds terrible. Leaving him with 2 kids from her other marriage. In 1891, he was a saloon keeper. In 1892, he was a special officer assigned to K Street from 2nd to 7th Street, which included the Chinatown area where the opium dens would have been. In 1892, as an officer, he was found guilty of battery and fined $10 for using foul language on the witness stand. George Clark was an opium fiend, staying at the Albion Lodging House across from Gasvin's Saloon on K and 5th. There were 2 black gentlemen that were singing on the corner. He didn't appreciate their music and told them so. They asked him how long they intended to sing. One of them told him it was none of his business, and they could sing until midnight. They had the right to sing until midnight. It was 9 minutes to midnight. He took out his pistol and went and tried to pistol whip him. And Charles Wetzel, police officer, came over and said, "Put that away." And Clark said, "What do you have to do with it?" Wetzel pulled back his lapel and showed his star and told him, "I'm an officer and I want you to put that gun away." The man stepped back and stepped forward again and said, "Well, maybe you want some of it." Pointed the gun point blank at him, and it went through his stomach and out his groin into his thigh and killed him. All right. The man, Clark, then coolly walked away. And then a woman, Flossie Van Tassel, ran out of the saloon after him. Flossie Van Tassel, I love that name. She said, "Charlie, for God's sake, what have you done?" She pulled the man away. They ran off across the street to get a jacket, and then went back and ran away, leading the cops on a merry chase along the riverfront and along rooftops and stuff before he escaped among the railroad cars on Front Street. And that's the story of Charles Wetzel. The handout that was going around had Dr. Farney's teething syrup on it. Dr. Farney was eventually fined $100 for misbranding. After all, the alcohol, chloroform, and morphine contained within it was anything but non-injurious to infants. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup this baby's friend had about 4 to 5 times the contemporary recommended dosage of morphine and alcohol for infants. And the St. James Society Easy Home Cure was nothing more than alcohol and morphine. So, right over here is the Grand Army of the Republic plaque and monument. And the Civil War was the first war where they saved a lot of lives, cut off a lot of limbs, there's a lot of pain. But first time that morphine was used. But the hypodermic was invented in 1853, but it wasn't really available on the battlefield at the time. Believe it or not, they usually just poured powdered morphine into the wound on the battlefield. After the war, of course, doctors were recommended to pass out syringes and morphine to their patients like they were candy. But the war, there's a perception that the war caused a lot of morphine addicts, so much so that morphine addiction was referred to as soldier's disease or army disease. But maybe it's too easy to blame them. Maybe, we could blame the morphine in the patent medicine or the greedy drug companies or the non-existent legislation of the times for that large amount of addiction that we had around 1900. And they just put it all on these guys here. All right.